Mm-hmm.
Because that didn't go right. But you know what? We're live, so I'm not going to worry about it.
It worked.
Hey, it worked well enough. I'm not going to worry about it. But welcome, first ever edition of the video version of RPMHD. We're going to do the recap from the NHRA Peak. Well, I guess it was like Gerber Collision presented by Peak NHRA Nationals. I'm here with Dave W. Dave, welcome back. Appreciate you joining me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And glad that you asked me to come do this. I miss doing the shows that we used to do last year. So it'll be great to actually sit and break down some of the action again at the track.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun this year. We're going to try to do every event or as many as possible and try to get this show on the road. You were out there this weekend. How was it?
It was a lot of fun. It was very, very hot. Hottest weather that I've been in all year because the Midwest, we've still been kind of in the 60s and 70s and finally crept up into the 80s. But I will say, very, very glad there was no rain. There was no storms. There was no weather delays for anything. Did they have a little delay on Friday while they were getting the timing issues sorted out? The track's been sitting dormant a while. They had a little issues with the ET and the mile an hour in the right lane. Still a little bit of issue with the mile an hour on the right lane, but the ET was recording, so they were good there. And it made it for some tricky track conditions, very challenging, a crew chief's race and a driver's race because you had to be ready to pedal it and you had to be quick on the line to advance through the round. So it was very entertaining, I think, from top to bottom, from Q1 to all the way to the last final round between Antron and Sean.
Well, you mentioned the conditions and how tough they were. I guess we can get started with that. How about that Brittany Force not qualifying for the event? Had to be a shocker.
It was a huge shock. I feel like they really got behind the 8 ball after Q1. And when they put them a little further in line for Q2, it's like, okay, the weather is still getting better by the minute. No, it's not completely dark and it's not completely in shade, but the track conditions are improving. And if anything, that they should be able to get in on this run, because that was kind of going to be the make or break run. Everybody knew that Saturday's sessions were a little earlier in the day. We were looking at about noon and 3:30 on Saturday. Not favorable conditions either time of day there. So when that car didn't make it down the track on that run in Q2, that was pretty mind-blowing that happened, especially considering some of the performances from the part-time teams that were able to get down the track and lay down solid numbers to end up eventually putting them out of the show.
Yeah, and especially heartbreaking being that it was a Peak event. You had a lot of Peak employees and people from the corporate office at the event. For her, I mean, I saw the Top End interview on TV, and dejected would be a gross understatement. I mean, she looked, I believe the quote was, "This is worse than crashing."
Yeah.
Is what she was quoted as saying. That had to be a huge disappointment, but you know what? When 22 top field dragsters show up to an event, you know, one of the heavy hitters, there's a good chance may not make it. It's only 16 spots available. And that's the name of the game. Put up or shut up.
And it was amazing just to see, like I say, these part-time teams come in here. Obviously, the most impressive, very, very easily goes to TJ Zizzo coming in low for 3 out of the 4 sessions to go to number 1. You know, he really hit it out of the box. And everybody was like, "Well, Q2, they're gonna get shuffled down, and it's gonna go back to status quo." And he comes out there in Q2 and lowers the boom to a 73, takes it right back, and it's like, wow. I mean, but just the caliber of cars in general, you know, Top Fuel is so tough, and it's getting almost to like Pro Stock, where 4th place all the way down to 9th place, 377s. And it just depended on where you were in the thousands digit. So that can make or break your eliminations ladder too, and who you end up with. And the fact that you had some of the big time teams like Brittany's team struggling, Tony Stewart on the bump spot was a shocker. Some of the part-timers like Doug Foley and Krista Baldwin, who are usually solid players, not making the cut. Luigi Novelli showed up, Terry Totten, Travis Shoemaker, part of the D&Q list. But then you had Cody Crone, Dan Mercier in the field, and Sean Reed all the way up to the number 5 spot. So it was a really diverse mix of drivers and teams getting down the track and teams struggling to get down the track, and it made it for a really good show.
No, it really did. And when you look at round 1 of Top Fuel, Tony Stewart versus TJ Zizzo, I mean, that was a race where I said, well, this is where the Zizzo Express ends right here. My opinion. At that moment, I said, okay, he had a good weekend. But Tony Stewart's team, we know what that team's capable of. You know how great they ran last year with Leah in the car. Tony's been driving real well. They've just having little issues here and there. But I figured they've had 4 attempts at the track. Round 1, Zizzo's done right here. Not the case. Not the case at all.
And I mean, really, the Top Fuel round 1 was, I wouldn't say a shock in some aspects, but yeah, when TJ came up there, and I mean, Tony left on him a little bit, but they went right down Boulevard, and I think they were second low for the round, 380 with a 5. Sean was low with the round at a 380 with a 1. I was kind of like, hey man, here we go. Maybe this is a TJ Zizzo kind of race.
Well, it sure looked that way. And then you look at Tony Schumacher with the Don Schumacher tribute dragster out there, and he's going against Dan Mercier. And for most fans, a casual fan or a fan who keeps up with the sport, you figure, well, Dan Mercier, thanks for coming. We appreciate your participation. But Tony Stewart's going to be in. It did not happen. Who saw that happening? And take nothing away from Dan Mercier. He went 377 on Friday night. He was in the field solidly. He did. It ain't like he went up there and ran a 401 and snuck into the field. I mean, he definitely earned his keep. I just didn't see him beating Tony Schumacher in round 1. I didn't see that happening at all.
No, and I mean, Tony was obviously a heavy favorite with the Don Schumacher throwback scheme, the Don Schumacher tribute that they had, celebration of life on Friday, hometown race, well, former hometown when Tony was from this area. Obviously, he's in Texas now, but a lot of pressure on that team. Thought that they were going to go around. They ended up not, unfortunately. That was a huge disappointment for them too. But just in general, the first 2 pairs of Top Fuel pretty much killed my brackets. They were busted right after that because I'm like, uh-oh. I didn't think it was going to be the upset Nationals the way that it was, but unfortunately, it was.
Yeah, another heavy hitter matchup was Doug Kalita, Justin Ashley, round 1. And the last round of qualifying, Doug pretty much had a jaw dropper, let everyone know he was here for business. And in round 1, he had low ET of the round. And Justin Ashley does what Justin Ashley does, beat him on a hole shot.
Yep. Low ET the whole round, quickest of, well, obviously the losers, but low ET the whole round at that 79, 330 miles an hour. And yeah, like you said, Justin actually doing what Justin does. 44 on the tree, puts 400s on him. But at the same time, everybody was kind of struggling in that left-hand lane. So for Justin Ashley to come out there and run that 382 in the left lane, the supposed, everybody else was struggling to get down it. That was the best ET in that side of the track as well. So yeah, you got 400s on the tree, but you still had to get the car down the track, and a 385 loses that race.
Correct. I mean, they definitely put up a stellar number with the conditions of where they were for that round. Take nothing away from Ashley. You really can't. I mean, he left on him. Doug was 88, I believe, on the tree, and that's kind of uncharacteristic of him. He's usually a lot better than that. I mean, he's better than the 88, but it happens to the best of us. And Doug had to fill that one. I mean, you think of that round. He went 330 mile an hour on that racetrack with that amount of heat on the track. It's like Alan Johnson, man. I mean, that guy.
It's amazing, like you say, that was uncharacteristic for Doug, but it's amazing that, like you say, they could put down that performance in that weather and in that lane.
Yeah. And then the event winner kind of went unnoticed all weekend. I mean, Antron Brown, I didn't have him in my pool. I mean, he just kind of flew under the radar. The guy was under the radar all weekend. I mean, if someone to say who did he beat this weekend, you could probably only name the finals because no one knows who else because no one really paid attention to him. He just kind of snuck in there and took the event.
Yeah, it was not a dominant, but I guess that's kind of like the whole development of the event itself. Guys that you thought were going to run well didn't, and guys that you thought weren't going to run well did, and it just kept shifting back and forth. And Antron, like you say, under the radar, but he went A to B every pass. Had that scary run with Jasmine Salinas first round when she got into trouble there, smoking the tires, and that thing got sideways and it went across the center line. I'm glad he was far enough ahead as he was, because that could have got pretty scary. But yeah, I mean, they were doing their job. They got the wins, and they put themselves in a position to be there at the end.
Yeah, no, they definitely did. And we all know, if anyone follows the sport, Antron Brown is never a team you count out. Never. But this particular weekend, they didn't raise any eyebrows. I mean, they just credit to that team. Antron and those guys, Mark Oswald, Brian Karate. I mean, congratulations to those guys. They definitely got the job done. What was probably the toughest event of the year due to the weather conditions and the track conditions. And, I mean, they did what they do. I mean, you take nothing away from those guys. It was a great weekend for them. And, once again, I congratulate them.
Yeah, for sure. And they were in the right place at the right time. And surprisingly, I guess on my end of things, because it seemed like the majority of race day, and I know that they do prep the lanes and they work them, but it seemed like the right lane was kind of the more favored one. But other than first round that Antron was in the right lane when he won, when Jasmine went across the center line, he was in the left lane the rest of the race. And put it down and got the win. So out of the quote unquote bad lane, especially after the semifinals when he ended up going to 389 and taking out Steve Torrance, who just annihilated the tires right off the hit. And then he got followed right down the right lane by Sean Langdon with a 376. It was like, well, they're going to pick lane choice in the finals. Of course, they're going back to that right lane. And, you know, Antron was in the bad lane, the quote unquote bad lane. Not that there really was one, but it seemed like that was not the preferred one. And they still made it happen.
Yeah, and when the way Langdon had Sean Langdon ran through eliminations, by the time they got to the finals, I don't know if anyone was picking Antron Brown. I mean, no. Langdon had the car to beat at that point. With Doug Kalitta out, Sean Langdon had the car to beat. I mean, and he was in the 70s, I think, twice, or no, in the semis, right? It was 76.
In the semis was when he laid down that 76, which was low to race day. Yeah, I mean, he had an 80 flat first round, an 86, a 76, and then an 86, which on most given weekends, comparatively speaking to what the rest of the field was struggling with, are winning runs in the heat, but just came up short in that final.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, it's got to be a bitter pill to swallow. But considering the conditions and how tough it was, I mean, the Torrance father and son raced each other round one. I mean, if you could get any round wins this past weekend out there in Chicago, man, you were doing pretty good. You were doing pretty good.
The Torrance matchup, the father-son matchup, I thought was pretty good. The fact that they both made it down both lanes, it was a pretty good side-by-side race. Obviously not the best of the round, but pretty close.
No, and I credit those guys because that team, whenever they race, they pretty much put on a show. You don't see anyone leaving way late or someone smoking the tires. I mean, we've seen Steve in the points battle and race his dad, and his dad gives him all he can handle. And, I mean, you can't do nothing but respect that team for how they race.
Exactly. And it's not – I mean, we already know at this particular point, unless some huge, drastic, dramatic thing happens that causes them to miss an event, Steve's going to be in the countdown anyway. So what does it matter if he wins or loses first round here? He's still going to be in it for the championship. So I think that takes a lot of the pressure off some of these guys when that situation comes up.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. It doesn't hurt. It certainly can't hurt. Moving on to Funny Car. Matt Hagan. He kind of did the Antron Brown thing. Didn't really raise any eyebrows throughout the weekend. Just kind of was under the radar. Once again, he's a team you can't count out, but got the win.
Yeah, it was very interesting that, and again, we were kind of talking about this a little bit before being on air. Bottom half of the field qualifying position, monster matchup with Ron Capps in the first round. But, I mean, I had faith. He was definitely on my brackets. I did pick him to win, but also knowing that up against Ron Capps' first round, that could have been a complete bracket killer, bracket buster right there had the Napa car turned on the win light. But they were not necessarily struggling, but to be in the bottom half of the field compared to what everybody else was running, they sure turned it on and came alive on race day.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Ron Capps is always a threat. He just hasn't been one lately. That's all I can say about that. He hasn't, and I think he'll be the first one to tell you. I mean, he said on top of an interview, sometimes you got to take a step backwards to move forward, and they're working with some new things. They got a new combination they're running this year, and they're struggling with it right now. When I saw that matchup, I didn't have all the faith in the world in Capps to win that round. I mean, had he won it, I wouldn't have been surprised, but had he lost it, I wouldn't have been surprised either. I mean, he has not really had the car that he's had in the past few years.
No, I agree, and I kind of think it goes back to what we were talking about with Steve Torrance. They're going to go to all the races. They know they're going to be in the contention for the championship. It's just where are they going to be seated when we reset the points. Right now, I don't know that this far into the season, many people had Ron Capps down in 7th in points and winless since the U.S. Nationals last year. The team has definitely been struggling. It's going to be interesting to see if they get to the point where they turn it around. And do you even really work on the hot weather tune-up to try and turn it around to go rounds, or do you kind of save your stuff for the countdown and really work on it then?
You know, that's a crew chief's decision. I would try to figure it out now because you don't want to go to the countdown and still have nothing to work with and try to, I don't know. They'll figure it out. I mean, Guido's smart. He's been around a long time. I wouldn't doubt that guy. I'm pretty sure he'll figure it out. They're just struggling right now. It happens to everyone. Bob Tasca, I think he round 2. Thanks for coming. Based off the way that car performs and what I've noticed, I don't know if that car is really a great hot weather tune-up. We know what it can do when the conditions are right. I mean, granted, he won Vegas. I wasn't at Vegas, so I don't really know what the track temp or anything was like that at Vegas. But for the most part, it comes off as a car that once the track temp gets up and the sun's been beaming, they're in trouble. And he got by round 1. I think he went a 399 or 398. And by round 2, he was out of there, smoked the tires. And that was the end of his day.
I mean, it's just kind of the lack of consistency, I think, is really what hurts him. I mean, yeah, coming down and running that 98. I mean, there were 3 runs in a row. And, of course, right out of that right lane, that was kind of like, okay, this is kind of going to set the tone for Funny Car. You had Paul Lee with the 397. You had Austin Prock with a 397. And then Tasca followed it with a 398. And you're like, all right, here we go. Force was right behind with a 404 off of it a little bit early, struggling to get down that on that side, which you didn't want to lose lane choice. That was going to be a big factor going in there. But when it came up to the second round, these guys were still in the preferred lane, and maybe they overestimated it, what the lane could hold, because they were the first pair of Funny Car, and they found out real quick that didn't work out. But congrats to Blake Alexander, who was in the left lane to capitalize on it, because that Jim Head tune-up had that car flying this weekend.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been a surprise to see actually Blake Alexander win this event. He almost thought it was his for the taking at one point. I mean, that car was real smooth in qualifying, pretty consistent. With the weather the way it was and the track temperature the way it was kind of running right up their alley. for an event win for those guys.
Yeah.
It just didn't happen. The guy who I think is snake bit, who's a win looking for a place to happen, is Paul Lee. I mean, that car is a win looking for a place to happen. It just hasn't happened. I mean, it runs good. It can beat anyone. He can run with anybody. It's one of the more consistent cars so far this year. Something just goes wrong at the wrong time.
Well, and he was having a good run against Matt Hagan in the second round, and he was in the preferred right lane. And then, like you say, just towards the end, just lost it.
I believe, it faded on. I believe he put holes out. I mean,
right.
It's something.
That seemed
car,
to be the biggest issue this weekend was dropping holes. That's what really hurt a lot of guys.
Well, yeah, when you're taking power away, but you're going to take enough fuel away, and it's still pouring fuel in there, you're going to drown out one of those spark plugs, and that tends to happen on those hot racetracks. When you look at Matt Hagan's day, I mean, it was really nothing spectacular. I mean, he beat Caps with a 408. He beats Paul Lee with a 408. Right. He beats Blake Alexander with a 405, and he didn't really do anything to really raise an eyebrow until the final round when he ran a 399 to beat Force.
Yep, comes out in his 11th qualifier, Ford owed him to death, and then turned it on when he needed to.
Yeah, I mean, he just, they say it's a right place, right time kind of sport, and him and Antron were pretty much in the right place in the right time all weekend. I mean, but once again, I'll take nothing away from that team. I mean, they're a championship team. You know what they're capable of. They didn't have a dominating performance as we're used to seeing them qualifying in the top half or using the top three and, pretty much blowing everyone away. They just kind of chugged it down through there every round and came home with a trophy.
And I feel like it's getting to the point now where maybe not the intensity has reached this particular level yet, but the Matt Hagan-John Force rivalry is almost starting to get to the Cruz Pedregon-John Force type rivalry because these guys are meeting in final round big head-to-head matchups, just like they did at the Winter Nationals, which ended in Phoenix, and then coming back and doing it again here. And I don't think there's no love lost on either side of that camp. They both love beating up on the other one, especially if you go back all the way to their championship battles of the early 2010s, Hagan with his huge disappointing loss and then coming back and winning it, Force winning another one. And, Hagan's looking for his fifth now, I believe, is what he's up to. And he's retaken the points lead over Austin Prock by 4 with that win. So that really had to, I wouldn't say upset Force, but not only to lose the event, but then your team car loses the points lead at the same time. Hagan kind of got a twofer on that one.
Yeah, he really did. And I mean, once again, the peak executives there, a lot of peak employees there for that event. It looked like Force's deal. I'm sure they were looking for a huge photo in the winner circle with a bunch of peak executives and people in close but no cigar. I mean, he picked the worst time to have his worst run of eliminations.
And it makes you wonder if that was all because of that. I mean, yes, he chunked it in deep and he had a 025 light. So, I mean, he was there. He had a couple hundredths in the bag. But like we talked about, had that cylinder out, started losing power, motored away.
Yeah, unfortunate but true. Still in all, it was a great weekend for John Force. I'm not going to say the team because the team didn't have such a great weekend. One car didn't qualify. The other one lost the points lead. So great weekend for John Force.
For John Force personally, I will go a step further and say this is a great year for John Force. John Force is third into points. He's only 42 out of the lead. And had that went the other way around, he'd only been 22 out of the lead. And we're pretty deep into the season. It's been a long time since he's been this high in the standings, this far into a season. You don't think about it that way, but he's been a middle to bottom 5 car the last couple years, especially when it's come down to the countdown. So the fact that he's starting with a win, the runner-up, the successes that he's having, do you say comeback for Team Force, or at least for John personally? I think it's pretty amazing to see what he's done.
Well, he went winless last year.
Correct.
The last time he went winless in a year was 2009. And he came back and he won the Winter Nationals in Pomona. He went winless in 2023. He came back and won the Spring/Winter Nationals in Pomona. Right. So we'll see. We'll see. This may be, this could very well be his year to get one more. I've seen interviews where he says he isn't really concerned about it as much, to where he feels his legacy is already sealed and he's just kind of build his program, and but we'll see. I have to believe that if he's top 3 in the points come the countdown, that fire is going to start burning deep, and he's definitely going to win another championship.
Well, and we always talk about it every year. Is this his last best chance to do it? He has looked good in the countdown a few times, but he's just never really been able to capitalize on it in recent years. When I say this, obviously, he's won championships under that format, but we're not talking about the John Force of old coming back, because he's not laying the smack down and going low of every session and got the field running scared, but he's at least a contender. They're not up there going, it's just Force. We get, we just gotta go A to B because we're going to get this one way or another.
No, you definitely have to respect him this year. You were there. Do you know what happened between the race with him and Alexis? Alexis was, I think, 400 on the tree, which a 4.0 light 20 years ago was good. Not today.
I do not know, because I was watching that particular round of eliminations from the 1,000-foot mark. I was on the fence at the finish line, so all I could see were just lights flashing and the cars coming. I couldn't tell who had a good light, bad light, whatever. You're down there, you're away from the track PA, you just got the scoreboards. So I watched that particular one from the finish line stands. So, not stands, just standing next to the fence, I should say. So I'm not sure what specifically happened with Alexis, if it was just getting distracted, or I'll take a look here and see if they have anything in the run notes about it. That doesn't say anything in there. Just Force had to start, which Force in general, Force even had a 113 light. So
yeah, he was
as bad as Alexis. They were both late. She was just way later.
Yeah. Way later is a gross understatement. She was 400 even on the tree. That's
she had a perfect light in 2001.
Yeah, it's been great in 2001. I know. I know Alexis struggles with her lights, and you can tell she's trying. Every once in a while she'll have a red light in qualifying, because you see she's really working at her lights and trying to get better at them. I don't think she had to have been distracted or something. Because even Force was kind of late. I don't know if a butterfly flew across the Christmas tree. I don't know what, but I'm guessing something distracted both those drivers.
Could have been a quick tree. You never know. It's hard to say.
You don't. But you know what? Once again, congrats to Matt Hagan and those guys. Like I say, come race day, I don't think anyone really saw it coming, but they did what they had to do. They were under the radar. They 4-0'd them all weekend until the final round, dropped the 3, and thanks for coming.
And honestly, these are the type of events that make it really hard when you're doing the drag race bracket bonanza and trying to fill out a bracket, because these summertime events are the ones where drivers like that have days like that, where the guys that you're just like, they're under the radar. So you're not even thinking about it after qualifying. You're like, all right, how good is Zizzo going to do? Okay, do I put Proc in another final? It's the guys that just were making runs, we're gathering the data, we're setting up the tune-ups, and sometimes just purely getting lucky, which it's hard to imagine using that description for a win for an Antron Brown or a Matt Hagan. But in the grand scheme of what the event looked like, that's certainly how it came out.
No, it definitely did. And once again, though, like I said, you can count neither of those teams out, but they definitely They definitely were not the cars to beat. Let's just put it like that.
Right.
They were not the cars to beat.
Exactly.
They were
I
not.
mean, really, I feel like this weekend there was only one winner that was pretty much the bike to beat that actually came home with the Wally. Everybody else was a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, and since you mentioned that, we can talk about that. I mean, Gerber, did he tie Dave Schultz or did he break Dave Schultz's win streak?
With 8 in a row.
I believe he broke it. He broke it.
So 8 in a row is the most consecutive. Dave had 7, so this is the new record at 8. However, the interesting part of it was in qualifying, and something else we were talking about before, maybe, Matt Smith might come in and spoil his party. He broke Gage's streak of 11 number one qualifiers in a row. So it was kind of like, maybe he's got the advantage going into race day. But at the end, Gage came through, still had low ET, still put on 4 win lights, and still collected his 8th Wally in a row.
Yeah, and speaking on the Matt Smith, like we were saying, I believe he had the quickest bike through the first 3 sessions. And he got that bike to 60 foot finally. I mean, he was 103, I believe 102 and 60 foot. I don't think he was anything slower than a 105 in the first 3 sessions, and he was low ET in the first 3 sessions. The 4th session wasn't quite as quick, but I figured maybe they were trying something, and it just never carried through the race day. I mean, round 1, Matt's bike, even though he won, it wasn't nothing stellar. It wasn't like he was doing in qualifying, and by round 2, he was gone.
Right.
He got beat, and once Matt Smith got beat, you pretty much, if you were there for Pro Stock Motorcycle, you might as well start heading home because you knew who was going to win the event.
But I will say this. I mean, honestly, Gage's best 4 runs of the weekend came on Sunday. I mean, if you look at the numbers, he qualified with a 673. He won a 69, a 71, a 72, and a 71. His worst light was in the first round with an 088, but the rest of them was a 9, a 12, and a 25. So when you have the quickest bike and you're only giving them a 200ths window, even if they have a perfect tree, how do you beat that?
You can't almost. I mean,
Right.
that's hard to beat, and I think I think right now Matt Smith has the only bike based off his qualifying results and based off past performances of that motorcycle from the 660 on, the way that bike back halves, I think it's still the best bike from half track to the finish line. I always said if he can ever put it together from the first half like he did in qualifying, then we'll see what happens. We saw what happened, and then I don't know what happened. I wish I could talk to Matt and find out what happened. I don't know what happened because, like I said, the round 1, the bike didn't really run like it did in qualifying, and I didn't think much of it. I said, okay, they'll tune it up for round 2, and he just got outran in round 2. And I really don't know.
It was really interesting, though, if you looked at the numbers, most of the other bikes, aside from Matt's, but most of the other ones where they ended up qualifying, the high 670s and the low 680, mid to low 680s, for some reason, stayed right in that range.
Yeah.
Matt qualified in the low 670s, number 1 with a 70 flat. All of a sudden, he was kind of like in the mix with everybody else. Now he's got a 79. Then he's going to run an 81 in the second round. He kind of like lost a mile an hour. He was down to 199, 198. I think maybe the motor might have just been going south. I mean, 201 in qualifying, he had top speed of the meet, and to lose that kind of edge, it basically, I mean, I hate to say it in this way, but put him back, quote unquote, in the rest of the pack.
It really did, and I almost think, I mean, it's like, what, did he get back on the Suzuki? I mean, what just happened here? And that's what I was looking at. I saw his mile an hour was down, and I mean, that Red Rocket, that thing stays in the 200s. I don't care what the track conditions are. That thing runs 200 all day, and for it to run 199 and run the ET it ran, I'd have to believe that something mechanical was going on, maybe electrical, maybe something Matt's chasing. I'm sure they'll get it fixed. I hope they do, because I do not want to see the Gage Herrera show all year. I don't.
You know what, though? If you ever been a Pro Stock Motorcycle fan, throughout, you either saw the John Myers show, the Dave Schultz show, the Angel Sealing show, the Matt Hines show, the Harley show. So I mean, it kind of comes in cycles, but
But back then those were two people shows. It was Schultz and Myers. It was Angel and Hines. This is just Herrera and Herrera. I mean, there's no one outside of Matt Smith who you say has a chance. I mean, no one. So, like I said, once Matt Smith lost in round 2, if you were there for Pro Stock Motorcycle, you might just go home. You knew what was going to happen. I mean, unless the spark plug shot out of the bike or something, Gage Herrera was not going to lose that race. It just wasn't going to happen. I don't mind if it's a two-person battle. I mean, you look back at, like you just mentioned, the Schultz and Myers. We watched that for years, but that's what people came to see. Forrest Petragon, Johnson Glidden,
well,
I want to see Smith Herrera.
It's coming. I think it's coming. I'm even surprised. So even when it was the quote unquote the Harleys against each other, it was still teammates. Richard Gadsden's getting there, but he's not there yet. He's still 500s, 600s behind what the team bike is doing. So they're not there yet. But I feel like before the end of the year, we're going to have a pretty competitive battle. I hope.
I think so. Based off what Matt was doing in qualifying, I think I'm looking. The bike's running in Epping. If they're in Epping, I don't know. Their schedule's a little changes up from time to time. But if they're in Epping, it'd be great to see how that turns out. If not, we'll just catch them whenever they come back.
I am checking currently to see where their schedule lines up at. I don't think that we're going to see them until Bristol. So they'll take Epping off, and then we're going to see them at Bristol. We're going to see them at Richmond, and we're going to see them at Norwalk. Then they're going to take off. Well, actually, no, I take that back. We don't have an event now. That event got canceled. So we're going to be going to the partial Western swing of Seattle and Sonoma. So we're going to see them for quite a few of the next races after not seeing them most of the springtime to start the season. We're starting to get into the thick of their season. So
it should be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Gage won. Congratulations to the Vance and Himes team again for the 8th time in a row. As great as a season as he had last year, I still say Dave Schultz had the most dominating season in 1994 of any pro stock motorcycle rider. My opinion, and I'm sticking with it. And when you look at that year, when a guy wins 9 of 11, and the only 2 races he lost is when he red light, so no one actually beat him. He beat himself. He very could have well won 11. He could have won 11 out of 11 that year. I mean, he was that dominant. As dominant as Gage is, he'd have to really do a lot, and I don't see it happening to take me off of that 94 Dave Schultz year of 9 of 11 wins. But we'll see. I mean, so far he's perfect. He has a chance. We'll see.
I feel like I know where you're coming from, but I also feel like they're somewhat comparable in the fact that if you ever look back at the numbers, Dave Schultz kind of had them covered back then too.
He did, especially that year. But here's the deal with that. As great as he was in 94, he got beat in 95 by Myers for the championship. So it's not like it carried over like Gage has had. I mean, it was a great year by Schultz.
His 94 was pretty much a carryover from the end of 93. Those 2 years were kind of his back-to-back ones. And,
You're absolutely right.
Like you say, 95, Myers kind of came back and Star Racing came back to prominence. And then Matt Hines kind of took over from there when he came in. It's interesting to see how the riders change, but whether it is or it isn't the Gage Show 2024, I feel like this is one of those moments where we always talk about you should understand when you're seeing greatness happening, and you may not see something like this again. Kind of like when Steve Torrance swept the countdown. Everybody's like, man, we're sick of seeing him win. But you know what? Who else has done it? Nobody.
No. When that happened, the only thing I can compare to that, and you can't compare them, but you can, as far as countdown greatness, is Robert Height 2009. I think he came from 10th. Yeah. I'm sorry, Robert Height. Yeah, Robert Height 2009, coming from 10th place and winning the championship.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty. It was one of those. Could it be done? It was done.
Right.
And what Torrance did when he swept it was just like, you just call that utter dominance. I mean, you just tip your hat to the guy and just say, yeah.
To me, the thing that I find most amazing about it is I don't think, or at least I don't get the impression from Gage, that as any streak continues to go further and further, especially even into uncharted territory, he's not feeling the pressure of like, man, you're going further, you're winning more rounds in a row than anybody had. You're coming up on this record. How far can you make this last? He's not going up there and choking and going red. He's not letting the pressure get to him. He's still going up there, doing his thing. He's cutting it close. He's cutting those trees. I mean, he had, like I say, a 009 and a 12 light. When you got the field covered by a 10th, you don't have to cut it that close. But at the same time, you can't change your game and what you're doing just because the bike's running good or just because you got the field covered. So he's staying in the zone. He's doing what he's got to do. And it seemingly is not affecting him at all. Like, pressure just doesn't get to this guy. He goes up, he does his job, and he wins the rounds.
Yeah, he's just riding his motorcycle. I mean, he's just riding his motorcycle. He hasn't had pressure yet. And I think once that Matt Smith bike gets, I think he got it figured out. I don't know what happened in round one, but I think I want to see what happens when you're lined up with a bike that's just as quick, if not quicker than you. That's when we see what you're made of.
Right.
Because right now, the way that bike's running, if me and you can ride a pro stock motorcycle, we could probably do what he's doing. I'm not saying we're going to go 12 on a tree every run, but,
no. Well, and that comment was even posted, or question was even posed to him in the post-race media from Mighty Mac. He was like, how do you, everybody's saying anybody can get on this bike and do this. He's like, but you're out there proving that, if that's the case, and he said, and when Gage's response to it was, the chassis may be the same, but they have, I believe it was 3 different motors that they're swapping around between all the different motorcycles, and the different motor goes into a different bike every time, and they're still running the same. So there's got to be something to it.
I don't know. I mean, when you look at his teammate's bike, it's running about 500s off of his every run.
Right.
And it's the same thing what Eddie was doing last year, though. I mean, it's kind of like is it Richard Gasson? He pretty much just picked up where Eddie Krawick left off. I mean, you don't see any change in that bike's performance whatsoever. I mean, it continues to be 500s behind Gage Herrera's. And I don't know. I'm not at Vance and Hines' shop. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. But you look at that bike, you go, well, it wasn't Eddie. You put another guy on it, and it's doing the same thing. So why is his bike so special? Like, is it the rider? I honestly do not know. I would like to think that, okay, if you add another bike, add a different rider to a bike, and you say, well, these bikes are built identical and they're identical, then you would get a change in performance somewhere. Unless Richard Gasson is just another Eddie Krawick and they're essentially the same rider. I don't know. I can't call it. And you know what? Vance and Hines obviously knows what they're doing. Credit to them. Credit to Gage and those guys. We'll see what happens as this year goes on. But hey, they did what they had to do. I mean, you're running 60s out there in those conditions. I can't do nothing but salute that.
That's right.
Moving on. Pro stock car. Who had, and if you had a pool, I don't think you had John DeFlorian getting out of round one.
Honestly, I mean, I hate to say it, but with the amount of cars that show up, I don't even know if you had John DeFlorian in the field, especially since he's driving Hartford's car that Hartford had been struggling with so much. And that's why Hartford wanted to bring out the old car. And he's just like, hey, we gotta get our setup back. We got to do something, especially with having the, your sponsoring the All-Star call out. You can't go there and have a bad showing. So, with knowing the amount of struggles that Matt has had with the car and Matt himself having troubles qualifying against this field, it was kind of, like I say, not a knock or a slam on him. It was just like one of those, they may or may not make the show, but they snuck in on the number 16 spot, and they did. And then from there, game on.
Yeah, it definitely was game on. And I mean, Dallas Glen won the event. We'll get to that in a minute. But for those who didn't know, John DeFlorian, and you probably don't know who that is because a lot of people don't, he raced Erica Enders round one. Well, Erica's known as a lever. Well, he left on her. 012 to an 064. 658 he runs. She runs 656. Thanks for coming, Erica. See you next time.
Correct.
Credit to him. 012 on the tree. Obviously, he knew who he was racing. I mean, Erica, obviously, you hate to say that the driver took another driver lightly, but if that's Greg Anderson the other lane, I don't think Erica's 064 on the tree. My opinion. I don't think so.
It's very possible. I know she said it. The problem is I didn't get to hear much of her interview because they were doing the motorcycles and running burnouts and whatnot, but she had mentioned something about it felt like the car was creeping with the clutch in, and she made a comment, something about the motors too. So maybe the motor laid down a little bit or they had a little problem. I mean, it wasn't just a couple pair before that Aaron Stanfield nuked one going through the finish line. So I don't know what it is with these guys and what they are doing to run these motors on the edge, but I don't think I've seen as many pro stock blown motors the way that we have in the last few years, the way that they're coming up with now.
Well, to go back on that, she said maybe the motor was laying over. She went 656 in the heat of the day. I can't really sit here and say at 209. I can't really say the motor was laying over. I mean, she would know far than I would, but based on her ET and speed, the motor seemed pretty healthy to me.
Well, and comparatively speaking, that 209.49 was top speed of the first round.
It was. So we'll throw that one out the window. I'm going to say, and I could be wrong, maybe she was having staging issues, but I'm going to say that based off of John DeFlorian's qualifying attempts and the way that car had been acting, because the first two runs on Friday, the car didn't even go down the track. It was just a mess.
Right.
She went up there and said, I'll just be decent on the tree, and I'm pretty sure I'll have them covered. And it didn't work out that way. To speak on the engine blown conversation, I haven't seen this many blown motors as we've seen in the last 3-4 years. But granted, it's only came from really one team.
Correct.
And I don't know. I'm not an engine developer. I'm not that guy. These motors have rev limiters on them now. So it makes you think, what exactly are you guys doing to blow motors the way you guys are blowing?
Correct.
It's not like they're over revving. I mean, in fact, a lot of the teams are hitting the rev limiters as they're crossing the finish line. So,
oh yeah, I was standing down at the finish line for pro stock, and I don't think any of them went by that weren't on the rev limiter. To be honest with you.
Yeah, so it makes you think: are you guys throwing rods out right at the? I mean, I don't know.
Yes.
How are we blowing motors when you're keeping the motors tapered down, so to speak? I don't know. Yeah. I really don't know, and maybe that's a question if we can ever get Maskin on here, Richard Maskin, Elite Motorsports. Maybe that's something he'll be on. Maybe I can get him on here to talk about it because I honestly have no idea. But moving forward, Pro Stock. There was a call out this weekend. I was not surprised, but I was surprised that Erica called out Greg round one. That was gutsy. But credit to her for doing it. I had no problem with that. I mean, we had 4 elite cars, we had 4 KB cars. And the thought process was that they would just all race each other, which they did. But we did not, well, a lot of people I don't think expected for Erica to call out Greg. It didn't help. It actually was her undoing, but credit to her for actually doing it. I haven't.
I'm kind of I'm one of the ones that's maybe not as surprised by it because I kind of called that. That was one of my predictions going in, and knowing the record they've had against each other recently, why not? And it after the first couple of times that they lined up in qualifying, she was cutting the tree and turning on the wind light too. So it's kind of like preview of tomorrow, buddy. See you first round. They made a last minute lane change, and it bit them.
Now you were there, and I believe were they first pair or no?
No, they were the last pair to call out.
They were the last pair.
They were the last pair.
I wonder what made them do that lane change. I know a lot of cars were shaking the tires this weekend out there, qualifying and eliminations. That was a tough track for Pro Stock to kind of get a hold of in low gear.
It was, but I mean, I get the impression that the lane change was because, for the most part, the left lane was the winning lane. And you had, I mean, the call out started with Derek Kramer, Christian Quadra, both of them shaking the tires.
Yeah.
It was a pedal fest. Second pair, Aaron Stanfield shook the tires, had to pedal it in the right lane. Matt Hartford gets the win. Third pair, they both get down the lane. Beautiful side-by-side run. Troy Jr. and Dallas Glenn, 016, 019 on the tree, a 59 to a 60. It seemed like, okay, here we go. And I don't know what it was that they saw, but it made them go over to the left lane because they figured, okay, maybe that's got better rubber. There's been better runs down that side of the track. Let's follow Troy Jr. They must have saw something when he was up there running the car. Yeah, and they went up there, did their deal. Erica had 100th on the tree, but I don't know what that car would have run had it made it to the finish line. But Greg going to 56.6, I mean, that was a pretty stout run for Greg. So Erica would have had to have been right there with at least a 57 in that lane to be competitive.
No, she definitely would have. But she did leave on him.
She did,
I believe.
And she did go first by 100. She got 100, so she
got 100 on him.
Did her job there, and the car, it just rattled the tires. I mean, it still saved the run. It wasn't like it was an aborted run, shut off. I mean, 709, but 203 miles an hour. I mean, she saved it and got it down the track. Just once that happened, man, you can't give up anything, especially when Greg's on the other lane making it from A to B with low ET it around. And I feel like Greg made a statement with that run. I think Erica in general, it was just a bad all around weekend when you follow up, the call out first round loss, especially when you go in calling out Greg, confident that these are the two biggest rivals and you're going to put them on the trailer, and you don't. Then you come up, all right, well, at least we're number one qualifier for the national event. Let's go in out there on Sunday. And then you are a known lever and get beat on a hole shot in the first round against a driver who is qualifying for his first national event and has not entered an NHRA Pro Stock national event since Dallas 1991. You got to be kind of like, that was a bad weekend.
Yeah, that's a head scratcher for sure. It was not a great weekend for her. Elite comes with so many cars. I mean, granted, they still had someone in the finals. I believe Aaron Stanfield was in the finals. He was holding the torch for them into the final round. It just wasn't enough against Dallas Glenn. Dallas Glenn is the car that the guy cuts lights. We're not going to take that away from him. And it's like, he doesn't have the household name, so he is like a thorn in everyone's side because he wins, and you know he's going to win. I mean, the guy is good for 3-4 wins a year, but it's like he's just a thorn. He is a thorn in your side in pro stock because you don't look at him as, can he win a championship? I'm not going to say he can't. Will someone pick him for the beginning of the season win a championship? Probably not. But will he ruin someone's life doing a countdown and throughout the season? Definitely will. He definitely will.
Well, and you have a combination of car and driver because, yes, Eric Latino seemed to have, I believe, a line lock failure first round. That's why he was 213 red. I mean, the car just took off when he brought the yards up. He couldn't hold it. But Dallas Glenn went a 656 with a 6. So that was still second low at around to Erica's 656 with a 5.
Correct.
Goes on to round 2. All right, we're against Troy Jr. I mean, you might as well basically be running Erica a second time almost with the ability on the starting line and the ability of the Team Elite to get that car down the track. 013 to an 016 light. He was there when he needed it because they both ran a thousandth apart, a 59.3 to a 59.4. One slip up one way or the other, or one, a couple more thousandths better light for TJ Jr. And Troy Jr. And that's his day's over in round 2. So I mean, he was there, but he was earning these rounds.
Oh, he definitely was.
And I mean, to come up against Greg, they did a last-minute lane swap against Greg in the semis. Did the same thing. Went over to the left lane after Jerry Tucker had the issue where he fouled. It seemed like same thing, 2-step issue, and probably shattered the tires right off of that because it just zinged the motor to the moon, launched it, shattered the tires. They were under the tower, and Greg was like, cool, we're going over there. We're not taking any chances. And when they did that, Dallas still got the thing off the line first. He had him, 15th thou in the bank off the starting line and got it down the lane, still with another 656.5 in the quote-unquote bad lane that Greg was lined up in. And Greg was like, nah, you know what? After seeing that, I'm going to the left too. And it seemed like the lane changes in pro stock hurt more than they helped. They were getting in their own heads at that point.
They were second-guessing themselves. They ruined their own lives on that one.
Yes.
I mean, Dallas even outran Greg in that race. I think it was a 656 or 658. So
58, exactly.
Dallas definitely earned this win. I mean, he's a guy that you can never count out. He's just a guy that you don't see with the consistency down the countdown to say, he's my pick to win it. I don't know anyone who's going to say, you know what, hands down, I got Dallas Glenn to win the championship.
Well, and I think that he kind of gets that because look at how last year started with he and Matt Hartford both, and we were already talking about like him, Matt Hartford, Derek Kramer, are we seeing the changing of the guard in pro stock?
Yeah.
And it didn't end that way.
No.
So they got flashes of brilliance.
Yeah. So. Yeah, Hartford tried. I mean, they went to the Indy and the Reading deal, and they Hartford was there, and then it's like it's almost like the racing gods gave them a taste and then put them right back where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what it seems like. You look at Matt Hartford when he went on that little run there, and he won Indy, and I believe he won Reading. Did anyone really think at that moment Hartford's going to be a factor? He's my pick. Or did everyone see, no, the racing guys are going to put him somewhere between 3rd and 5th, right where he's supposed to be? I mean, unfortunate but true, and I hate to say it like that, but that's just what it is. That's just how it works out. And that's just pro stock racing. Outside of what? Who can we mention in the last 20 years where you could say they won a championship out of nowhere and no one expected it?
There really isn't. I mean, maybe Jag when he stole some of the countdown stealers when Greg had the dominant year and then lost.
Correct.
Correct. Something like that. We've had a couple of late season surges where you just get hot in the last 6 and take it. Which you hate to see because you're like, man, that guy dominated all year long.
Correct.
And then he comes up second.
But the reason you give Coughlin a pass is because Coughlin had won championships prior to the countdown format.
Oh,
so
for sure.
You sit there and you look at that and you say, you know what? Even though he whole shotted his way to a championship, he's Jed Coughlin. He's done it without the countdown.
Correct.
The only guy who may have surprised you was Mike Edwards that first year. But even that first year, he dominated a lot of that season to where it was such dominance. It was like, okay, going into the countdown, I can see Mike Edwards winning this. Like, I mean,
yes.
It wasn't a shocker at that point because of what he had displayed throughout the year. Hartford, Glenn, Kramer, they show what you call flashes, and then they give you hope, maybe even themselves hope, and then they come back down into reality somewhere between St. Louis and Pomona. And that's just how it goes.
Well, and I will say this, since we're talking about it in general, and again, I know you really hate to look at it this way, but we're so early in the season, and we know that we're going to reset them, and we know that as long as you don't skip races, you're going to be in the countdown, so you're going to be part of the reset. But Dallas Glenn took the points lead with his win by 4 over Greg Anderson. So them two have kind of separated themselves a little bit. Erica Enders is 66 back with their first round loss, down in third. Jegs in fourth. And, like we were talking about how Matt Hartford was kind of potentially a countdown contender last year, or could be, with his struggles this year. He's not in 14th in the points, something that nobody really anticipated seeing at all.
I believe he's had 2 DNQs, right?
Correct. Yes, he has.
Yeah.
Obviously, I understand that does not help your situation, but compared to the start that some of these drivers, Derek Kramer, 11th in the points. Like I say, we're talking about how last year started and how we were kind of thinking that this might be how things might shape up or change out to this year. That's quite the downfall.
No, and so he's 14th in points, and you remember how Erica started off last season. I mean, she was out of the top 10 after 3 or 4 races. She started off the year horrible, and then no one really, I don't think it really panic set in within the fan. If you're an Erica Enders fan, I don't think you ever had panic because once they hit their mark, I mean, she was rolling. I mean, it just was win after win after win. Next thing you know, she's in the points league. You don't really have that kind of confidence in a Matt Hartford of saying he's 14th in points. Not to say he won't make the countdown because he's going to be at every race or won't make the top 10, but you don't really look at him and say, oh man, once that guy finds it, they're in trouble. You don't really have that same sense of confidence in a Matt Hartford that you would have in Erica Enders, just because Erica's so proven at doing it over so many years. I mean,
it is true. Yeah, she has the track record, and he does not yet. But that's not to say that he can't.
No, that's not to say that he can't. But here's where the difference lies. They're running the same engines as everyone else. So where do you differentiate yourself from the rest? Whereas 20, 30 years ago, if Warren Johnson or Bob Glidden or someone at the time is a little off, and you say, hey, when they find their mark, look out.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you're still looking at gear ratios. You're still looking at chassis. You're still looking at starting line. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, I don't want to say it's turned into an IROC class where everybody's equal and the driver sets it all apart. But I can understand what you're saying, where the differences and the gains that you find are more minute. But at the same time, if they hit it at the right time, could we see a Derek Kramer, a Matt Hartford? I mean, Troy Coughlin Jr. at this point is all the way down in 8th in points. Not something that you'd expect from him this far into the season either. And if these guys are all running to full pull and we're resetting the points, now we've obviously got quite a bit of racing to do before we do that, and they stay down there, could any of those guys come back with a Robert Height-like countdown and come from outside the top 10 to a championship?
I think Troy can, just because of his driving ability. Because when it comes to the countdown, it's all about who leaves first. I mean, let's just face it. They're all running the same power. One comes from one shop, one comes from another. Outside of McGaha's, everyone's running the same stuff. And it's like you say, it's all about gear ratio. So it's who leaves first and who can 60 foot.
Right.
That's pretty much what the class is right now. And if you have a Troy Coughlin in 8th in the countdown, I'm willing to bet that he finishes above that.
Yes.
You know, if we get Matt Hartford and he's 8th come the countdown, I'm not willing to bet he finishes above that. He might.
Yeah.
But the chances of you seeing Troy finishing above that and Matt finishing above that are just, the expectations are just different.
Right.
And
for now.
And no one can really get upset with me for saying that, because at the end of the day, the drivers and teams set the precedent for themselves. I can only go off the track record of Matt Hartford. Granted, he finished third in the points last year. Congratulations. Nothing wrong with that. I need to see more. And this year, we ain't seen nothing. I mean, we haven't seen anything. Two DNQs.
Yeah.
Not yet. And for all we know, the guy can come out and win the next race in Epping. Very well could happen. Yeah, that very well could happen. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, anybody could turn that's the crazy thing about Pro Stock, is anybody could turn their season around in snap of a finger. But I mean, when you look at this year in general, we're 6 races in, and you've got Greg Anderson with a pair of wins, Dallas Glenn with a pair of wins, and then Erica and Jeg as the other 2 winners. So, I mean, so far you kind of want to put, give the edge towards the elite or the KB camp over the elite camp with what they're doing.
Correct. But once again, because of her track record, and you know this, Erica can run off 3 in a row.
Oh yeah, you're not going to count her out. And I honestly feel like what I was talking about with her reaction to the way that the call out went and getting used up in the first round, I would not be surprised for her to come out and win 3 in a row or come out in Epping swinging. I mean, Erica, motivated and driven, is scary out on the racetrack. So I'll be interested to see how Epping turns out for these guys.
No, it really will be, because when she's motivated and she feels a certain way, it can definitely be bad for everyone else. But we'll see. We will see. I mean, we're just really getting into the heart of the season. It's a lot of racing left. There's a lot of racing left, so we'll just figure it out. I mean, once again, credit to Dallas Glenn and that KB team. They did what they had to do. I mean, is their second win this year?
Second win, yep. And
second win this year.
So 2 wins, number 1 in the points. Sure, it's only by 4 over Greg, but when they print the sheets, he's at the top.
Now, do you see him? Oh man, I dropped my phone. Do you see him sustaining that?
No, I think it's going to be a seesaw battle back and forth between him, Greg, and Erica. I mean, with as close as the 3 of them are in points, Jeg's 140 back, so they've got a pretty big cushion on him for him to start stepping up and getting into the mix. But as of right now, they are kind of your big 3 when it comes to the Pro Stock standings.
Yeah, I would say that. It'll be interesting to see how these next few races going. You kind of just can't wait for them to get to this back-to-back-to-back thing with the races like they usually do during the summer, where you can really just kind of everything starts to level itself out, and you see who the players, the true players are. But we will see. We will see. Well, Dave, it's been a great show, man. I'm not going to hold you. No. I know it's late over there on your end. For those of you who are watching or are going to watch, I'm way in California, and he's way on the East Coast. What state you in?
We have a big time difference right now.
Yeah, huge time difference. So, you're looking at 8:30 p.m. his time. It's 5:30 in my time.
Right.
We're not going to hold Dave up. He's been in Chicago enjoying the drag racing all weekend, and I've been lifing. So, Dave, it was a pleasure, man. We'll do it
sure.
again after the next event. For those of you who watched or are going to watch or catch this thing later, we're going to do our best to do this every Monday after every national event. We will get better. This is our first time doing it. So we don't have any video highlights, but we will get to that part. It's a starter. First time.
Yeah.
But for those of you guys watching, thank you guys. Dave, once again, thank you for being on the show, man. I really appreciate you. I enjoy doing this with you. It's nice to have somebody to bounce off this stuff with. And I can't wait to do it again.
Oh, yeah. Always love talking the drags. Can't wait for the next one and can't wait to break it all down and see how the rest of the season plays out.
Man, you and me both. Well, folks, that's it. See you next time.